On behalf of my colleagues at the Media Rumble, welcome to the third session of TMR Dispatches. The Media Rumble is an annual forum that brings together leading news professionals, tech innovators, policymakers, filmmakers, and investors from across the world to discuss the future of news, tech, and policy. The fourth edition of TMR, slated for September 2020, will be India's first digital-only media conference and is titled TMR Online. In the lead up to TMR Online, Newslaundry and Teamwork Arts features a new series, TMR Dispatches, focusing on local issues of significance. Our session for today is Mumbai's Lutyens. Is entertainment journalism all about access? Our panelists, Anupama Chopra, Mayank Shekhar, Ravina Rawal, and Sowmya Rajendran, will be moderated by Abhinandan Sekhri. Abhinandan is the co-founder of Newslaundry.com, a reader-supported independent news media organization. He has co-founded the production house Small Screen with Prashant Sareen, and before founding Newslaundry, he worked as a producer, director, and writer in various television and film projects, including the award-winning food and travel show Highway on My Plate, and the news satire shows such as Gustakhi Maaf and The Great Indian Tamasha. We would like to thank our official partners, Google and Hyatt. Do follow our social media handles, the Media Rumble, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get notified of the upcoming sessions. And in case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, The Media Rumble. Ladies and gentlemen, Mumbai's Lutyens. Is entertainment journalism all about access? Moderated by Abhinandan Sekhri. Abhi, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjoy, for that wonderful intro, and welcome panel. Thank you all for making the time. Before I get into the discussions, I'd just like to introduce each of you. Let me start with Mayank. He is the first film critic in India to win the Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism. So congrats on that. His last book, Name, Place, Animal, Thing, was critically acclaimed, Amazon top title. His ongoing podcast is Sit with Hitlist and has won multiple awards. And Shekhar was the founding editorial team of Mumbai Mirror and has been the national culture editor with Hindustan Times. He's currently the entertainment head with Midday, and you can follow his writings on his weekly column called MS Word. Hey, Mayank.
Hey.
Ravina is the founder and editor of Dedant. I guess that's Dedant, right?
Yes.
An online publication and a new media venture focused on comedy in India and internationally. She's got 15 years of experience in media and entertainment. She was previously the editorial head for youth and English entertainment at Viacom 18, which has under its, bouquet of channels MTV India, Comedy Central, VH1, and some more. She's the former editor of Motherland magazine, the Sunday Guardian 20 or 2.0, what is that?
20.
Okay, and MTV Noise Factory. Welcome, Ravina.
Thank you.
Sowmya Rajendran is deputy news editor with the News Minute, one of my favorite news platforms. She heads entertainment and features over there. She writes on gender, culture, and cinema, and she has a focus on women's representation on screen. Sowmya is also a children's writer who was awarded the Sahitya Akademi Bal Sahitya Puraskar in 2015. Welcome, Sowmya.
Hey, hi.
And Anupama Chopra is a film critic who I'm sure many of us are aware of. We have seen her work. She's a television anchor, a book author. She's been writing about Bollywood since '93. Her work has appeared in publications such as New York Times, Hindustan Times, the LA Times, and Vogue. She's the founder and editor of Film Companion, a platform for entertainment journalism with a main focus on Bollywood, Hollywood, world cinema, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, Marathi cinema. That pretty much covers everything. And she's also the writer of two books, at least two books. I don't know if she's a mob, which I've read. One is, in fact, on my shelf. First Day, First Show on Sholay. And I have had a very interesting meeting with her, which she would not remember. But some of my favorite stories at the music launch of Kareeb in Manesar. In the
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Where Vidhu Vinod Chopra ripped into me. And Veer was doing damage control. And I went to my colleague, Geeta Datta, and said, who do you think he is? And she's having met on the bar. I said, I'll meet on the bar later. Who do you think he is? She said, I'll meet on the bar. And then later I put two and two together. It's a fun story. Sometime I'll tell you.
I love it. He never needs a reason to rip into anyone.
Good times, yeah. So welcome all of you. Thank you for making the time. I've told you, what I want to discuss. We'll try to pack as much as we can in 45 minutes. But let me start with you, Anupama. I mean, the premise is, and I mean, I personally, that is my thesis, that it's true for cricket, but we won't discuss cricket here. But I think cricket and cinema have two things in common. If you have access to a Sachin or a, Dhoni or whoever, journalism is restricted to an interview with a star. Now that star can be a player or the team owner. That's pretty much it. In cinema, it's a lot more. It can be writer, director, actor. But that is all film journalism has been reduced to by and large. Is that true? And is that unique to India?
I would argue otherwise. I think, in fact, that more and more, thanks to the net, thanks to the fact that we're all digital journalists now, there is so much more. There are op-eds, there are essays, there are video essays, which we're all trying to do now, which is just wonderful. But of course, the thing that gets you the most eyeballs is the interview with an actor. There's no getting away from how star-centric the film industry is. And I'm speaking here about the Hindi film industry, but I think it's true for most film industries in India, and for how much journalism also revolves around that access and around which star you can get. But I want to qualify that by saying that I would like to believe that access also has to do with quality. You have access because you bring a certain quality to the conversation. It's not just about she's a friend and therefore I'll speak with her.
Okay. I mean, what you said is also true for politics. I mean, not that he'd ever speak to me, but an interview with Narendra Modi would definitely get you more eyeballs than a report. But that doesn't mean that's all that news platforms do. But in the case of cinema, Mayank, tell me, is that the case? I mean, for example, and also if you could weigh in on, is it unique to India? For example, for the longest time, and I'm not saying it's a new phenomena, even earlier, the biggest story I'd imagine would be the underworld money in cinema. It has everything a journalist needs. It has glamour, it has crime, it has, establishment intervention and understanding, and it has Bombay, which is the most cinematic city, minus Yash Chopra's love for Delhi, in India. That story was never done.
It was. I did it in Sunday Magazine in 1993.
Yeah, but other than that, was it a story? Like, was it the biggest story of the year? Now, I get there were a few. I mean, there were a few. So there was your report. There was a report even Newstrack had done on that. But it was. It wasn't the story that was in every paper. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thanks for having me. I was going to say Sunit Tandon. For some reason, you started looking a lot like Sunit Tandon, or maybe it's just the lockdown look. To answer your question, I think we tend to, put Bollywood or even film journalism into a very small box. It's actually much wider than we would imagine, and especially when we cover it in Bombay, because it practically affects every part of our life. So, for instance, all the reporting that we've done on COVID is not very different from what everyone else has done in migrant crisis. It could be spot boys having to go back to the village, or the dancers and things like that. It could be about how these people would make a living, because everyone has lost their jobs, and these are all essentially wage earners in the sense of daily wage earners, right? So there is that aspect, and there is the aspect, as you mentioned, about, for instance, the underworld connection, right? The big story in cricket was match fixing. It wasn't done by sports journalists. Are you telling me all these sports journalists who'd been touring all their lives with all these cricketers were the only ones who had no clue what the hell that match fixing is? It was done by non-sports journalists. Likewise, there's a lot of film journalism that we do, for instance, at Midday, which has been done by the best crime reporters we have, right? So if you're talking about the whole Sanjay Dutt case, for instance, the 93 blast, or if you're talking about all those other tapes that came out, that didn't come out from entertainment journalists. Entertainment journalists, of course, knew Sanjay Dutt really well, and they knew Salman Khan really well, but it came out from another area. So I think film, by and large, at least sitting in Bombay, touches too many things for it to only be restricted to cinema stars. Yes, they do bring in the numbers, and that we've kind of established, because that's easy to establish. You go to YouTube and you'll see who's getting the maximum numbers. But the best stories that we do, for instance, and we've done it for years now, is actually stuff that comes out of a set. It's actually somebody who's the assistant director, who has an axe to grind, who gives us a story, or a writer, somebody who's on the periphery, and that's how the big stories happen. Those are the tabloid stories, and those are the ones that really count for journalism in the way we know the term per se, which is no different in politics, certainly not any different for business, would be about asking the right questions and about getting the right information.
So I'll come back to you on this.
Yeah.
That means film journalists will not do that. That will be done by somebody else. Why? Because it'll spoil the dynamic. Is that it?
Well, a couple of things here. There's some information that actually will, for instance, the Sushant Singh Rajput case, right? Every piece of information that's coming out in terms of what did Bhansali say, what did Aditya Chopra say, what did Shekhar Kapoor say, it's all deposition to the cops. The film journalist is not going to have that connection. Where we use film journalists in a newsroom is for the phone number. If the person is not picking up and we have to send the page off, then man, just text him, because this is exactly what the stories. We use film journalists in that moment to get quotes, because they don't have the access to that information. But then information can come from various places. Would the film journalist should ideally take a second byline to that story? A lot of them don't, but I can understand, because what they do is very separate from what that particular story is about.
Right. Okay, Sowmya, you write on gender. Now, I don't know whether you've seen the Weinstein documentary on Netflix. It actually, there's one journalist, I don't know whether she was for the Vanity Fair, I forget which magazine she worked for. She was a photographer, her husband was a reporter. And Weinstein actually pushed him to the ground at a party. I think it was post some film or the other. And he had the kind of power. He said, click all the pictures you want. Not one of your pictures is going to find its way in any publication. Now, that being said, the Me Too, ripple effect did burn big cinema in the West as well. Hollywood was touched. Here, nothing was touched. Everything remained as is. We can't take names because it's libelous. I'm aware of one story that was ready to be uploaded, and at the last minute, the prime, person who had made the accusation backtracks, and then publication had to not go with the story of a very big star. Now, that kind of story we haven't seen out of here. Is it because, even though what Mayank said, there have been some crime stories that were done, but that was after the state had slapped a Tada case on Sanjay Dutt. It wasn't like pre-enter, these are the kind of people who are coming in and out of Sanjay Dutt or Sunil Dutt's house. Are we still far from touching Bollywood, if that's a term that is acceptable? I don't know if that's the politically correct term these days.
I'm fine with it.
I think if I can speak from the South perspective, even before the Me Too movement really came to India, we had the Women in Cinema collective happening in Kerala, in the Malayalam film industry, where a top star was accused, and there's a court case against him, of course. So there was a lot of shaking up happening in the Malayalam film industry at the time. And as film journalists, we did cover that. Now, as you know, News Minute is a very small organization. So it's not that we have a dedicated entertainment desk which will only look at this or which will only look at that. So we covered those stories like we would any other story. We didn't care about whether we were going to burn bridges or whether this would lead to upsetting other people in the industry and so on. So I think when it comes to entertainment journalism, there is a line between being a PR person and being a journalist. And I think you have to decide how thick that line is going to be for you. So as far as I'm concerned, that line is very thick for me. Now, when coming to, Weinstein, over there, I feel in Hollywood, a lot more people were willing to come forward with not just their personal accounts, but also material evidence. So, there were people who were able to corroborate accounts. There were people who were willing to share emails and so on. Whereas in India, we haven't seen that kind of a concerted effort as far as Me Too is concerned. So even though we've spoken to a number of women who have made these accusations anonymously, they're very worried about really speaking out and, making this public. So I think that's one factor which kind of pulls entertainment journalists back from pursuing a story further, because here I feel within the own industry, the women, their power is so little that they really can't afford to speak up much.
But Sowmya, while I understand what Newsminute and Newslaundry, the economics of running organizations like yours and ours is very different from the economics and the economic logic of a Times Group or the India Today Group. So could you just comment not just on, I mean, we don't give a shit about burning bridges, but that's because we have 40 salaries to give. If we had 4,000, then would we care? When you're talking millions, when you're talking, an audience that is not just a bunch of people who are enough to sustain you, you're talking, you have to be the biggest leader in the market. Then is it inevitable, this kind of PR exercise in journalism?
I think to a certain extent it is inevitable, but you really have to draw the line somewhere, and if sexual harassment is a big story, I mean, why is it not a big enough story for you to actually take the risk? That is the question that we should be asking.
Other than Newsminute, has the case of, because I've read a few of those, cases that you're talking about, has it been taken up in a big way by legacy Malayalam media or no?
Yes, of course, it is a very big story in Kerala still, and but unfortunately, we feel that at a certain point the PR campaign of the star in question also comes into effect, and then they start publishing positive stories about the person to kind of balance the coverage. So all of that happens, but it was a very big story. Yes. Okay, so Ravina, you cover comedy.
Yes.
They're the new stars for the millennials and the post Gen Z or whatever is.
Gen Z, I believe.
Gen Z. So one is, of course, comedy stars, at least what I've observed over the last 2 years, tend to self-combust for some reason or the other. But when it comes to catering to an audience of relative younger demographic, are they interested in news? Are they just interested in listicles? How would you approach entertainment journalism that is not just restricted to big cinema, whether it's Malayalam cinema, Hindi cinema, Marathi cinema?
So in terms of covering comedy, it's it's brand new. So Dead Ant, what we did initially was to just sort of lay the foundation and highlight all the things that exist within this space. So what is it all about? Like, what are the different sort of parts that make it the whole? Because mainstream media only picks up what is sensationalized or when an FIR is slapped against somebody or whatever. And so that's the only kind of stuff that everybody hears about. So to kind of talk about that there's so much else that's going on is kind of what we have looked at. So we do listicles, we do reporting, we do analysis, trends, and then of course reviews and news and interviews and stuff like that. So it's a mix of what you call like content creation and journalism, where that line is of course debatable, but we are approaching it journalistically. So we do invest in a lot of like reporting as well, because there are things that are coming up within the comedy space as well that need to be discussed and reported on in a very thorough such as the Me Too thing that happened, or what has just gone down last week with the whole Agrima Joshua incident, where comedians were being made to apologize for offending sensibilities and stuff like that. So those things need a sort of a more you need to get into it in a more reporting kind of space.
In fact, I'd like to come, because 3 of the journalists are from Bombay. So I want to talk about this whole apology thing, because when I was in Bombay for a year, I thought this was very unique to Bombay, and why is that? But Anupama, is this phenomena of, I get that there's a balance that, there is a lot of journalism that is where the story is in the entertainment space. I still think it's way less than what it can be. There are way more stories out there than are done. 2 things. A, is this unique to India? B, what are the kind of stories if, you were, say, okay, you don't have to worry about any repercussions, you don't have to worry about the economics of it. What are the stories that you think are there to do in cinema and entertainment right now?
I don't think it's unique to India. One of the big conversations in the West as well is the sort of puff piece cover story. Who do you have access to? The access to Tom Cruise gets cut if you don't write a certain way, or even sort of approval of the articles before they go. I remember years ago, when Tina Brown was still the editor, there was this whole conversation. I can't remember which actor it was, but there was this massive sort of conversation about, do you cut off that access or do you give him approval of actually what your copy is? So it's everywhere, it's anywhere where there are massive celebrities who you are covering. And, speaking for what we do at Film Companion, see, we are a curatorial platform. Our mainstay is reviews. So we're not about breaking news. We're not about let's do investigative journalism. That's never been what, I actually did some of it in India Today, when I first started. And I have to tell you, you were speaking about a massive organization, but I spent 12 years at India Today, and there was not one time when anybody ever told me, don't do this or go easy. Same with NDTV when I worked there, same with Star World when I did the front row. Of course, that was a show which was about reviews and interviews, but I was never told that be nice to anyone in a review because we need the access. So at least in my experience, nobody's come back to say, just अच्छे से बोल दो क्योंकि, don't be too harsh. So honestly, of course, there's so many stories to cover. If there was, a sort of opportunity to, again, it's not what I do, it's not what Film Companion does, but there are tons of stories that are waiting to be done within the film space. I mean, Me Too being one, the great N-word, nepotism being the other, opportunities, talent agencies, casting directors. I mean, I was told 10 days ago that casting directors are now becoming their own monopoly, even though they're the people supposed to be kind of, equalizing the playing field.
Sure.
So there's lots of stuff to be done, but truthfully, I don't know, Mayank, I can't imagine that Mayank sits in his office and says, I won't do this story because I'll lose access.
I'll just come to I agree with you that, I mean, even when I was in jail, no one told me, one thing or the other, although the circumstances, like you don't remember when we met, were very interesting. There was at Manesar, which was back then it was the Boondocks. I mean, Manesar was very far away. Now it's part of NCR. And Kareeb's music launches, I think it was maybe 96, 97. It was my second year or third year into. And that time Newstrack and Aaj Tak were the two English and Hindi things. There was no channels. So obviously our cameras would get preference wherever we went. And I told Vidhu that, after Parinda, which was because I was in school and Parinda happened. It was this cult film. 1942 wasn't very successful. I must have used the flop. But he ripped into me. Tum bacche ho, tum kya jante ho, ye wo, toota. And I went to Geeta. I said, who do you think? And she kept trying to introduce me to you. I was like, dude, can you listen to my dukhda? She says, have you met Vidhu's wife? I said, oh, okay. So that was the music launch of Kareeb. But no one told us what to do, but we learned from what we saw. You see, even today, no one will tell you not to do a story, but this generation of journalists will know how to interview a prime minister from what they see Rajat Sharma, Sudhir, and all these guys do. I mean, they're not going to imagine how. And I learned from what I saw Madhu Trehan doing. I mean, we all learn from so no one tells you anything. So, and just one thing, is it conscious? Like, I get that your style isn't ladai jhagda like some others, but you were interviewing the director of a film where guys slapping the girlfriend is a sign of love. It was remade into
Sandeep Vanga.
Yeah. I think it was a Kannada film, but it was remade into Hindi film.
No, Arjun Reddy, Telugu film. Kabir Singh.
So in that, I mean, what he said on, to you was really offensive. I don't expect you to say, how dare you and stuff. But you think a pushback would have been more had you been interviewing a politician? Like, would you have challenged what he said? Maybe not impolitely, but saying that, dude, that's deeply problematic, what you just said. Are the rules that we have inherited different for when you're interviewing stars?
Well, I would argue that Sandeep Vanga is not a star in our universe because before Kabir Singh, nobody knew in the Hindi-speaking universe that, So for me, that interview, which, created too much noise, was genuinely an effort to understand where he's coming from. For me, again, it's just not who I am. I am not a confrontational person. I never have been. I push back to the level I'm comfortable with. But when I'm speaking to people, I genuinely want to know what you were thinking when you created that person. That's my whole interest, especially with directors, like what was in your head. And to create a character like this that has worked in some 5 languages across the board, he's obviously hit on something that is connecting with people. So for me, I think it was a successful interview in getting him to say what his, what his point of view was. What I regret is not defending my colleagues enough. I wish I had defended Rajiv Masand more. I wish I had defended Sucharita Tyagi, who works with me, more. I think I was just sort of taken aback with how much anger there was in him. This was literally the Thursday or the Saturday. It was literally one day after release or something. And he was just filled with kind of rage at the kind of hatred he was getting. And I wish I'd handled that better.
So Mayank, 2 things. What are the stories that, if all stops, no economic consequences, no budgetary constraints, what are the stories that entertainment has to offer right now? And have we inherited, by we, I mean, me and Anupama one generation, you're another, but have we all just inherited a politeness towards film stars that we have separately in our heads, and how we interview others is separate in our heads?
Honestly, Abhinandan, my thing is, and here I'm speaking to you as a journalist, plus also a consumer of journalism. I mean, I read a lot of news. I'm a news junkie at the same time. And I think the real massive stories are in business, right? I mean, everyone's a crook out there. And you see nothing in business journalism. The real massive stories would be in politics. Everyone's a crook out there, and they actually owe us something. We elect them to power, right? And look at the journalism that's happening there. I was on Arnab's panel last night, all right? And he's called Shah Rukh Khan a murderer, Karan Johar a murderer, Alia Bhatt a potential killer. This is all there on record, all right? He's saying these words. He's calling them suicide gang. I want to know if he could say anything even close to it about Ambani, or anything close to it about Amit Shah. He can get away saying these things about these people because, honestly speaking, all they have is soft power. In a real sense, they don't have any power. You know what I mean? They can't destroy me. I can say what I want to, and I have in the past, and especially my 20s, I used to be a crazy guy. I mean, you should see some of the stuff I've written, and I would just say and do stories as we felt like, and we continue to. At Midday, we take pride in that fact. And because we're a tabloid, we get away with a lot as well. We say that's our genre of journalism in any case. Me Too, we have about 10 cases, lawsuits, but we did about 25 stories, all of them going anonymous, but 3-4 people and all those things. So I don't think we hold back. I think people in other forms of journalism hold back further, and I totally understand why. Because the guy in the government, the real Lutyens, the Amit Shah or the Modi, these are really powerful people in a real sense. They can screw you over. Right? They hold labels to power. They can go after you. They can send agencies after you personally. If not you, then they can go after the owners, etc., etc. So there's far more scare there, and business, of course. I'll give you an example. I mean, and then just about, so let's say I've been around for almost 20 years, right? And that's about 1 lakh plus stories either run or done, right? 1 lakh plus minimum. But I was shitting bricks 2 years ago for a story that I did on Ambani. Right? On the fact that Mukesh Ambani, in principle, has agreed to fund Amir Khan's film and give 1,000 crore for it. Now, I had it like in a way that this story cannot be denied. Right? I know it's true. I knew that getting in touch with Reliance for this would mean the story is going to be canned. The only way to do it is nikal do and fir kal dekha jayega. But that night, I was freaking out here. And we've done all kinds of stories about every movie star there is, and you don't feel that. Because there isn't that real power in the morning. Yes, because Reliance can take away ads. They can genuinely harm the commercial interests of the paper. And would that one story be worth it? And it's a bloody positive story. It's a good thing that he wants to give that money. Yes, that he wants to make Mahabharata. It's an amazing thing. Even then, if you shit bricks, I don't want to know what business journalists go through. I genuinely don't want to know what political journalists go through, because that fucking threat is real. It's not so real here, I feel.
Sowmya, is that the case because in the southern states, the transformation from a film star to a politician to a god is pretty swift, and Jayalalitha is famous and notorious for going after journalists, and because she was in the center, it was never noticed like it is in other cases. is it true that even there they don't have any real power, what Mayank said? And do you have to have real power? Is economic power or cutting off access not enough of a disincentive for legacy media who have big budgets, big circulation to cater to?
I think in the South, what really happens is a lot of abusive campaigns take off online when you do a story on a star, which is not very positive towards them. So there are a lot of people who are subjected even for a negative review. So, the fan armies, they start trending abusive hashtags and it goes on for days. And the star usually never intervenes. They never, open their mouth and say, stop it. So there is some kind of, let's say, they do know that it's happening. It's not that they don't know, but they allow it to happen because that's a way of silencing the journalist who did that story or who wrote that review. So other than that, I don't think there's a really, an on-ground kind of effect if you do a story on somebody. And people like Rajnikant and Kamal Hassan, they've now entered politics, but I don't think they're still big politically speaking. They don't really have real power politically speaking. They are huge stars in the industry, and when you speak about them, it sets off these fan troll armies. But other than that, I don't think it's really cause for worry for an entertainment journalist. When it comes to access, of course, if you do a story that a star does not like, it's very normal for them to stop speaking to your media house, and it has happened to us quite a few times. Like I remember this Tamil star, he gave us an interview right before the release of his film, where he justified stalking. So there was a question on why his films, regularly promote stalking, and his answer was that, well, it's not a problem that I stalk women in my films because I always marry them at the end of the story. So that was his understanding of the whole narrative.
Then it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. So we quoted him exactly, and we carried the story, and of course, a lot of people who read it were outraged, and it started off this big campaign to boycott the film. That's not what we said. We never said that we have to, people have to boycott the film. We just carried the interview, in his own words, and he was convinced that we were out to sabotage his career, and this is all some kind of a paid campaign. So after that, he's never given us an interview. Even one time, his PR fixed it for us, and later he cancelled when he got to know that he's going to be speaking to us. So such kind of things happen, and to be honest, I don't think TNM is really too worried about it because we are very clear about what we want to do. So like you said, maybe that's the advantage of being a small media house, being a small independent media house.
Okay, Ravina, if you could just weigh in if you want, because you're in Bombay, you got to be careful, I understand. This whole thing, like when I saw one after the other, these, stand-up comics apologizing, I would think this is a story. And in fact, Quint tried to speak to a bunch of them. No one wanted to speak. And this is from my experience. So, just before I quitted the India Today group, I had been sent to Bombay. I was there for about 3 or 4 months. And this is just shortly after the Jessica Lal shooting in Delhi. And I remember I said something about Bal Thackeray, who was alive at that time. And I was told by the accountant of the India group, no less, this may be okay in your Delhi. You can't talk like that over here. So I was like, and what does that mean? He said, at least we don't go around shooting women in bars over here. It became this whole Delhi Bombay thing. I was like, well, the only thing is I can stand outside the chief minister's house in Delhi and shout what I want, and I don't have to fear for my life. Have we got used to, because of the Bal Thackeray tradition, he said, people apologizing too quickly in entertainment? And because I understand journalists also face a lot of backlash, but I don't see them all apologizing one after the other the way it's happening there. What is the reason? Are they genuinely that vulnerable because they don't have institutional backing of the news organization they belong to? Or they feel that there'll be no coverage in case they are attacked? I mean, they are nobodies to feature on front pages.
So I think that this Bombay-Delhi fight will be happening forever and ever. This is never going to stop in every aspect of whatever we do. But on a more serious note, when you're talking, why the apologies went out one after the other is this is a very, very new industry. Okay, it's about 10 or 12 years old. They're all learning. So there are two parts of it. One that has sort of found its feet and is evolving and is getting all the specials and all of that, and they have a little bit more power. Then the much larger percent of artists in this space who are who are sort of still finding their feet and figuring out how to navigate a space like this. For them, if they get attacked suddenly or somebody takes offense and, threatens them with legal action or whatever, they don't have the wherewithal to kind of, deal with that. They don't know how to deal with, they don't. So the minute that there's a lot of them that have fought to, first of all, be comedians in the first place. So there's been a lot of like fighting with families and saying, to even get on stage. Then a lot of them come from small towns to Bombay to kind of make it. This is your like hub for urban comedy in India right now. So for them, they don't want, and their families are being threatened. See, what happened just now in the last week was that numbers were leaked and addresses were leaked, and now your family is under threat and whatever. As journalists, you still kind of have an idea of what the protocol is when this sort of happens, or what you need to do. But I don't think these artists, they're still figuring it out. And because we don't have earlier generations to have learned from, like journalists do or Bollywood does or whatever, they don't have a sort of frame of reference. So they're winging it as they go. And when it comes to political pushback, there was somebody standing at the venue smashing furniture and saying, until I get an address, I want an address. I'm not going to stop smashing furniture and, being like, we want the address to be able to go and rape somebody.
Something like this happens. Do they seek out, like, one of the insurance policies that other whistleblowers had was that I'll talk to the press. So that credibility was there. If anything happens to me, it'll be up there.
Right.
Do they not have faith in the press? What's the reason they're not talking to anyone? Because I know several reporters have tried to talk to them. They don't want to talk.
So I think they don't trust mainstream media yet because like consumers, artists as well are very, we did an article where we did a report on it, and we got quotes from Agrima and Kunal Kamra and a few others as well, and from stakeholders as well. But that's because now we have grown into a place where you can sort of trust, but mainstream media, you're not sure how they're going to spin it. And they're not used to being covered. They're not used to being approached by journalists, which is something even I find that, that they're so nervy and sort of, they're so nervous about what it's going to look like. And because they get attacked so easily and so much, they have already been attacked, that I think that they're just extra careful. And they don't, they should be saying, okay, I'm going to take my story to the press. But I think that for them, it's like, that doesn't matter because I'm just opening myself up to more then. And I don't have any sort of, there's no institutional backing. There's no, I don't have political power. I don't have, the resources. I don't even have money. So to deal with things at that level is tough.
Anupama, feel free to weigh in on this, but quickly, this whole nameless blind pieces, Newslaundry did a piece on blind pieces recently. Is it, it's unfortunate what happened, and when Sushant died, an amazing performer, tragic death, it brought these blind pieces enough into the spotlight. But is that an inevitable part of an entertainment industry? And where does that fall into the whole journalism space? Is that journalism? Is that just the film glossies it should be restricted to? Or are you in favor of that being part of some page or the other in national dailies? Is that journalism at all?
The truth is it's not. It's been part of the landscape since I was a teenager. Stardust had Neeta's Natter, which had all kinds of stories. And I remember what the stories used to be ki किसी के ceiling में से cash निकल आया, and किसी के flush tank में there were mounds of cash, and it was stuff like that. So it has been part of the landscape since then. It's not a new thing. I think what's happened is it's just become very harsh because of social media. It's become more in your face, WhatsApp forwards. And when I started, film journalism itself was a very restricted to a certain space type of thing. And now film journalism is everywhere. It's on, there is no like travel magazines sell because of actors. So there's no that kind of line that used to be there, that this is film journalism, this is something else, doesn't exist anymore. Look, I'm not going to take the high moral ground here. Is it journalism? No, it's not. But did we all consume it? Yes, we did. We did. We all read them. I could never figure out those damn things. So it was very frustrating. But But the reason they were run is because people consumed it.
Sure.
So we're all in this. I mean, we cannot stand above it.
Yeah, I mean, although I get where you're coming from, but I have, because this is one of the arguments that's put forward for the quality of news also. I think it's inevitable that a Jersey Shore or a Big Boss or a Big Brother will always have a larger audience than a 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
But does that mean all news organizations become Big Brother? I mean,
of course not. Of course not.
Those who have more power have more choices. So I think there's a big difference there. So Mayank, all these nameless pieces, and if you could tell me, why is there this, I mean, are people in entertainment sitting ducks, which is why, you saw this spate of apologies. They don't want to talk to the press. They don't trust the press. Has the media changed? And therefore, even when the story is maybe sympathetic to them, they don't want to interact with the media because of what you said happened on Arnab's show last night. The credibility gone.
No, so here's the thing. I mean, just a quick one on blind items. I read your Newslaundry piece. I was quoted in it as well. But if you go back, the point I was trying to make there is not against blind items at all. There are certain stories you cannot put out. I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with Ambani for some reason today, but the fact that the Ambani brothers were going to split was a blind item on page 1 of Times of India, right? Because you cannot say it. But what is a blind item to words? Are we being moralistic? Are we like taking a trip for someone because he drinks too much, or is he a scourge? I have a problem with that. I have a problem with the intention.
It should be public interest journalism.
Yeah, I mean, why are you doing it is more important than the fact of it. I think it has a legit space in certain cases. It's in the same way that we can have a debate about the sting operation is a good thing or a bad thing. It's in that zone. But your intention will have to override everything else in terms of why you're doing it. I think the blind items on Sushant were in really bad taste. And I knew whatever little I knew of him was all through blind items. And I was like reading up on him on the day I was writing the obituary. And I was like, oh my God, how many are there? So which is why I was like deeply appalled by what was going on with him on that front. Sorry, to go back to your question. What was the second part, Abhinandan?
The second part was, is there a distrust of the media? Like, Ravina was saying, people in, comedy or one section of entertainment don't want to engage with legacy media because they don't trust how you're going to...
No, I think it's got more to do with how vulnerable you are personally. I saw that in the spate of Me Too stories that we did, and the girls came forward. They didn't want to be named. The people they were referring to knew in 1 second who those people were, right? Because they've done it. So, I mean, I was getting a call from the person who is being accused even before that story is out, because we are reaching out to the person for the court, but that girl is getting that call as well. So, I mean, thank you for corroborating the night before. For sure, this is a true story. So you go with it, right? But the point is, when those sexual harassment committees were formed, none of them came forward. Because then they're personally, for us it's a story, and then we move on to the next story, right? But for that person, whether it's a stand-up comedian or an AD or a model, I mean, these people live on their own. Most of the times, as Ravina rightly put it, they've already fought one battle, which is at home, to be getting into professions which are not that secure to begin with. Then the parents saying, like, over this you have another headache to deal with, which is dealing with the powerful people rather than just with the talent that you have. That's good enough for you to move forward. So I think that's a personal thing, and it may just happen to the best of us if we are left out in the open to hang dry, right? Today, a lot of things I say or do is because there is institutional backup. I mean, if there is I could approach the cops, or I'll have friends among journalists who can do that for me if there's a problem in a way where I'm being personally attacked by a mob, as it were. But individuals don't, and they're really vulnerable in that sense. I think it's coming from there rather than distrust of media, because we'll be happy to publish, but we can't give you protection. That's something that you'll have to figure out yourself.
Sowmya, any winding up thoughts and what you think of these blind item phenomena? What is the story that you think is worthy of being called journalism when it comes to entertainment?
Yeah, I agree with what Mayank said. If it is in public interest, then I am for blind, stories. But otherwise, when it is just gossip about who slept with who, I mean, as long as it happened consensually, I don't think it is anybody else's business what happened. So But there's one point I'd like to make. I was talking to a senior entertainment journalist, a couple of months ago about how entertainment journalism has evolved. And she pointed out that earlier these kind of sexual harassment stories would appear in something like, the gossip column in a film magazine, where it would be glamorized as the casting couch. But now we have moved it out of that space, and we are actually doing serious, proper stories on such things. So I feel that as long as it is in public interest, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But otherwise, these kind of gossip things, I mean, I'm happy to consume it online, but beyond that, I don't really see any value in it.
And Ravina, finally, if you could give us your winding up thoughts on when you are, yours a young organization, it's a startup. Are you looking to build it on the back of journalism or just intuition listicles? Because the revenue models for both is very different. And therefore, how you hire people, your HR policy, just the entire character of the organization changes. I mean, you're going to have to make a choice at some point, right?
Yeah, so I think that we are sort of building towards that. We are taking a journalistic approach to it, in that we're not doing it, we're not just creating content, but what that skew will be, I think is still developing, is something that we're still sort of exploring. I would like to build it on something that's slightly more substantial than just having listicles and stuff going out, which gets a bad rap for no reason. They're really easy to read and you can put a lot of information in that.
They're very tough to write also.
Yeah, they're tough to
really
write.
Tough to write, yeah.
Yeah, if you really take it, yeah. So I think what listicles look like now are also very different. So yeah, we'll see as we go, but we are taking a journalistic approach to this because I think that it's a very important art form, and it needs to be covered. It has the power to influence how people, a lot of youth is thinking and how they're feeling, and I think it's important to sort of have somebody there that is holding you accountable, not just to performance standards, but also to, ethical standards and moral standards and stuff like that. And to just see how it evolves and to track it in a very thorough way. So that is, and as far as access is concerned, let's hope that they respect, that serious artists do respect that you won't always be
You can always surround them, like the channel Mayank was on Arnab's reporters. हमने चारों तरफ से घेर लिया है. Shashi Tharoor. The police had not surrounded Shashi Tharoor, but his reporters had surrounded him. So let's see what journalism we move into. Thanks, Anupama, Mayank, Sowmya, and Ravina. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjoy, and all our colleagues at the team Media Rumble and Teamwork Arts and Newslaundry. And you as the audience, we hope you enjoy the TMR online when it's up and on. Until then, the dispatches will give you an idea of what all you can look forward to this year and coming years. And guys, we were so keen to have a really big Media Rumble this year, but maybe next year when it's the physical form again, we'll get you here and then we'll have a longer, and then you can have an interaction with the audience. It's great fun, I promise you, you'll enjoy it. Thank you all for making the time, appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Abhi. Thank you all, Anupam, Mayank, Sowmya, Ravina. What was really interesting was to hear Mayank say, talking about the insecurity of the journalist, but yet he didn't hold back his punches and named about roughly everybody in the spectrum.
We'll see once you have this out.
Absolutely fascinating. But thank you all, and thank you all for watching. We thank our official partners, Google and Hyatt. We hope you will enjoy the conversation, and we'll log back on Friday, the 7th of August at 5 p.m. for our next session, Reclaiming Center Space in the News, a robust market and innovative hub. Stay tuned for more information, and thank you for joining us.